Travillian Next is a division of Travillian, a financial services specialist search and talent advisory firm. Since inception, the Travillian team has dedicated itself to enhancing the return on investment of a company's most important resource, its people.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Travillian Next. I'm Brian Love. In my role as head of Banking and Fintech, I get to work with some of the most talented, passionate executive leaders and bankers in the space. In Travillian's role as an executive search firm, we often work extremely closely with HR teams in our search processes for senior and C-suite executives. So on today's presentation, I invited onto our show Sam Berg, Chief Human Resources Officer at Choice Bank. Hi, Sam.
Hi there.
Thanks for joining us today. Choice is a $5 billion in assets bank, which was founded in North Dakota, primarily serves North Dakota and Minnesota with traditional banking services. And then across the nation, it has fintech partnerships. So it serves really the entire country. And it also has employees in 22 states, so that's keeping you busy, Sam. Choice is one of the more unique banks that Travillian has encountered in the space. We also invited Choice, I believe last year, to be on Travillian's Tech Forward Bank Index because it's right there at that confluence of traditional banking and fintech banking. So we love dealing with Sam, her CEO, Brian Johnson, and many others on the team. So to get us started today, the gist of this was that talent, recruitment, and retention is on everyone's minds right now. Even decades ago, the war on talent in the bank space is a term that you've heard a million times. But in this moment, especially with Choice's focus on fintech banking and more unique business lines, if you asked any board member, any head of HR, any CEO, they'll tell you that talent recruitment and retention is paramount in this day and age, in this climate, especially the year that we've had. So I wanted to bring on Sam to talk about these things and more. So Sam, my first question to you is really about talent strategy. So tell me about shifts in strategic planning in terms of talent, given the current headwinds that we're seeing in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Brian. It's exciting. And as you said, a topic that hasn't gone away. It stays with us. And so from a strategic standpoint, the first focus is internal prior to looking out, because I think that sets the stage as to what people are going to see when they look in and decide if they want to come. So we're spending a ton of resources ensuring that we have people here that are aligned to vision, mission, and strategy, because then they're the ones out going and bringing the talent in for us. We're here to help clarify and to create transparency into what that is. So unlike a lot of other organizations, our HR department oversees internal comm alongside of OSM. So it's that continuous marketing in on itself as to vision, mission, strategy, and just that steady drum of who we are and what we're here to do. And then ask the tough questions. So we love asking tough questions of our people leaders, and whether it's, are you forgetting to recognize your team? Do you need to spend more time coaching? Or do you need to ask some tough questions? And we have an internal coaching team that drives these very concepts because, if you have people that don't want to be here, then sometimes, we need to help them find ways that are going to make themselves happy. And when you have people who want to be here, they're excited continuously about bringing in top talent. And we continuously ask the question, who's in your talent pipeline? So we never, ever stop sourcing candidates. If your team is full, you keep sourcing candidates. Very similarly, we have conversations, with you, Brian, on a regular basis, and individuals around the industry. And that's how we've gotten a lot of our top talent, is just because you continuously have the conversations and you make it a priority of everyone. If your organization is going to rely on your HR team to find you talent, it's not going to happen. It's going to take more time. You need every single person within your own organization, within your circles, having a constant pulse on who else are we going to bring into this exciting place and thing that we have going on.
And Sam, as you're saying that, I'm also thinking about succession planning, right? Because succession planning at its very core is looking internally and externally for the right, next level of leadership. And it sounds like you're also thinking about that as you're talking to your people about always recruiting.
And it's not just for the current jobs we have, because we've grown so quickly that you're needing to think about the jobs that you have, but then the jobs that you're also going to be needing within the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, because we're constantly building new layers as we build different divisions in our organization.
Yeah, and actually, I probably didn't introduce you as well as I should have. When we first started talking to Brian Johnson and others on your team, I think you guys were maybe $1 billion, $1.5 billion in assets. And just a few short years later, you're 5 billion plus. I mean, that growth is extraordinary. So you've recently also had some rock star hires. Love using that term. Congratulations on landing some of those folks. Tell me, how are you able to attract these big fish, another term I love to air quote, to a bank that may not be relatively well known? And feel free to talk about some of those hires as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very proud of kind of being this little secret in the Midwest, and it's fun to see people's ears kind of perk up when they start to hear some of the things that we're doing. So in most of our recruiting efforts of these big fish, as you say, and we have 2 specific to our leadership team that we just hired within the last year and a half. One, Shikar Singh, he's our chief technology officer. And just in the last couple of weeks, Tom Jasper, our chief operations officer, both having significant experience in significantly larger organizations. As we grow with the speed with which we're growing, we need people who have been in those spaces and have done it. You just don't have the time that we once had to kind of learn organically. You just need to have the knowledge today. And so, I think you asked the question earlier, how do you get them over the line? Or how do you, what did you have to work to get them interested? And luckily for us, the word is out there of who's this little bank and what are they doing, because they're creating big waves and people are curious. And Brian Johnson, our CEO, always says it, we can't explain the culture, you can't explain who we are until you just get in and feel it. And Brian, I know you've had so many of those conversations where you're like, gosh, like this place is fascinating and interesting. And so really it's the advocacy of our employees and partners that get that initial curiosity in these talented professionals. And then our willingness to just have conversations at absolutely any point in time, regardless if it's something we think we need today or in the future. And so it's bringing us the talent, luckily today, really without us going and having to search really hard for it. So it's just a constant effort versus a one-time commitment that I think some organizations find themselves in finding particular jobs they're looking for. We're having conversations all the time.
Yeah, and I got to meet Tom and Shikar recently. Shikar was telling me he was on a vacation in Minnesota, I think, with a family member and his family, and they were like, we want to move here. So, and I guess he just found you kind of organically through that. He was down in Texas. And then with Tom, TCF, that disruption with them being acquired by Huntington allowed you to find, I guess, Tom during a period where, maybe he wasn't retained at his current employer or he was, looking for other things. So it's really great to kind of, be there and pounce on some of that great talent.
It is. And what's fun about Tom's had a chance to, step in an advisory capacity and guide a lot of other financial institutions. So he's seen outside of just that, experience with TCF a ton. And so he's able to, I think, very quickly identify what's unique and what's working versus some of the organizations you go into, you see pretty quickly what's not. And so he is just excited to help us really share who we are, because in the Minneapolis market itself, again, we're still a pretty quiet force. We just entered that market probably 5 years ago, and it takes time. And so he's like, why doesn't everybody know who we are? And so he's he's just joined us in the last couple of weeks, and there's an excitement and a pride point, even for the employees to know that, they're choosing us. is a big deal to say that these people are seeking us out. They're hearing the big things we're doing and they want to be a part of it is just a point of pride that we're all excited about.
Some sort of fun with the name of your bank, the choice, right? The choice is clear, right?
Yes.
By the way, another thing you said to me that is like so awesome to hear, and we always talk with our clients about it as we start searches is, if you're telling me that you're a $2 billion bank, you want to be a $10 billion bank, you kind of have to start hiring the $10 billion bank candidates, right? It's hard to hire the 2 and train them up to be 10. Like there's different complexities that happen as you grow. It sounds like that's a part of your culture is, kind of knowing what the vision is. You mentioned vision, mission, strategy, and executing, finding those bigger talents. But the question I really have for you is, how does the rest of the team react when you bring in these bigger fish? It can be a little bit of a kind of a culture shock both ways, right?
That's a good question. And I think that can disrupt any organization and make some significant impact, both good and bad. And there is, in this significant growth and in us getting into these spaces that we've never been in, and the current staff needing to learn and grow, there's a bit of, I would say, question even of yourself. Do I have what it takes and do I have what it needs? And so it's really understanding the current skill set of the people that we have and knowing that, yes, the ability to grow, learn new things is a part of who we are as an organization, but to say that takes time. And sometimes you don't always have the time. So you just have to go out and get the knowledge. And really hands down, the reaction to the talent that we've brought in is an openness and an excitement because it's allowed us to move that much quicker, because we know it takes time. We would have had to go out and get the research and the information, and they've got it. And so I don't know how many times in the last 6 months I've heard, I can't believe I'm sitting in this room with this talent, amongst our leadership team, and just being able to look across the aisle. I mean, even myself, with the SVB fallout, the couple weeks thereafter, we had, so to speak, some war rooms of those weekends trying to make sense of everything that was happening. And it's so cool for me to be able to sit back and not be in that war room. I'm in human resources. I don't have a ton that I can provide in that scenario, but I can be in that weekend and trust who's in that room making the right decisions because of the talent we've brought along. Where in the past, we might have all just had to be in there because we were just all trying to make it work with what we had. And so it really allows you to trust and kind of let go to see the things move forward with the right talent that needs to be there. So luckily, we've got the amazing trust and support of the team that has seen through proof these amazing talented hires just believe and contribute to the organization at a higher level.
And probably pretty quickly too, right?
Very quick.
Yeah. Yes. So you mentioned, the bank failures, and also, I mean, with your fintech arm, have there been any changes in your recruiting strategy this year, or are there any new hurdles stemming from that volatility?
I can't say this year. In the coming months and years, obviously the regulatory spaces are going to ensure that our teams are fully staffed. I think we luckily have really built that team up very quickly, and a lot of that talent has come from larger financial institutions that are ready to be a part of something a little bit smaller, something that they want to contribute and build. And so it's been exciting for us to be able to attract some of that talent when I know the risk and compliance space is typically challenging to build a team, especially at the speed with which we needed to build our team. But again, that's probably the largest spaces that we've seen so far. Maybe some of the other challenges is more in some of the traditional banking. I think some of the banks that aren't a part of the fin space are feeling a little insecure about what they have and being able to compete in the banking space that exists today. And so there's a little bit more of a fight for those traditional roles and saying, well, we better bolster the traditional space and the talent that's there because we're not out in these other spaces that the industry is out within. So honestly, the excitement in Fin and us being able to get the talent in those spaces has been much easier than some of the traditional spaces.
It's a good point. The replenishment of talent in the industry on the traditional side is much slower, much rarer. Even commercial lenders, generally there are young lenders, but you don't see as many. But on the, a lot of that talent went to technology over the last couple decades. Kids out of school pushed into that space. So now, a company like yours that has that fintech angle might be able to recruit some of that talent, kind of the best of both worlds there. So no, that's definitely a great strategy. And you don't need to tell me, we've been so busy on risk compliance, regulatory type searches kind of across the board, all over, not even just at fintech friendly banks, but others as well, just due to the regulatory landscape. This is kind of a riff off of the big fish talent you've landed. My next question, and it's about compensation. So, obviously for banks to be competitive, they need to pay up for talent. It's an inflationary market. It was a candidates market, still is. How do you confront this, especially if this person may be being paid more than their direct peers?
Compensation is tough. It's an emotional topic. And it's something that changes. So if you go get a report, it's outdated the day that it's published. So, but the good thing is compensation, especially in today's market, is one of those things that there's data out there for. And to know that it's hard to dig yourself out of situation in comp if you don't get it right away, because of the emotions, because of the things that tie us to our worth and what we're making. As you mentioned, that new talent can often require large comp, which can position yourself in a little bit of a pickle with your existing staff. So if you don't have your existing staff trusting the process and the research and how you achieve that data and the fairness in which you're paying people, it's going to be a hard place to position yourself when bringing that talent in. Because you asked me that question, earlier before we started recording, and doesn't that feel weird when you're going out and getting this new talent, and sometimes you have to really pay for what they're currently making at these much larger institutions. And my response to that is to say that the data is there. We're living in this world that we can get our hands on really whatever we need to get, and that includes the staff. So if they can look at your data and you can validate the price point as to why you're bringing individuals on in the market that position is in, you have the trust. So it's really just being able to do the homework, do the work prior to doing the recruiting, so you know where you stand, and ensuring that you're getting your current employee base in the positions that they should be in as well, because comp moves so fast, you can find yourself really, racing after your tail if you're not careful.
Yeah, and that's something you said earlier, when that person that you maybe had to pay up for a little bit enters the team and makes instant contributions and takes things off of your plate. Like you said, I got to step back a little bit, right? Because now there's other people who can do some of these things. It's those moments that make that extra money worth it, because now someone else can be more efficient in their seat. Younger organizations, more entrepreneurial organizations, you've got people wearing 10 hats. Now you only have to wear 5 when you hire that new person in. So it also sounds like the culture that you've created, I'm sure it stems from Brian and the executive team there, around, I guess, the ego piece, right? That we've got to have no ego. And this industry is kind of rife with egos. I hate to say it. I've got one too. I mean, we all have one. But just kind of curious, how do you create a culture that way that's kind of selfless and open?
So one of the things we talk about a lot is just being uncomfortable. And, the phrase growth mindset gets thrown out there, and you see highest maturity when people are willing to, acknowledge how much they don't know. I think some of those phrases, are great to use, but not a lot of people know what it looks like in actual practice. So when we simply talk about just being uncomfortable, it positions you, actually one of our cultural imperatives in our last strategic cycle was to say that we don't know everything. But what we do know is how to serve. And that's our secret. And that's our secret sauce. It's what we do and it's what we do well. So if we can step back and position ourselves to learn and listen at all points and understand that we don't know everything, we can be open to others coming in with different perspectives. And, we talk about having a challenge culture. I believe Nigel Travis wrote the book. And we use the phrase a lot at Choice because it's going to be uncomfortable. If we have the diverse and talent teams we want, there's going to be disagreements, there's going to be different thoughts, different perspectives. But if we don't have those things, we're not as good as we could be. And so being able to challenge, being able to step back, acknowledge you're wrong, I think that's one of the arts we do have here, to know that we might be right, but not right today, or learning from each others who have different experience and being open to that. So I think that's what is positioning our egos a little bit lower, hopefully, if that's the case, to say that it's okay that we don't know, but we're learning as we go, and we always, jump in and dive and tackle with anything that comes our way. But let's go get the information that we can get, if possible.
Yeah, it's a great response. I love that response. Be uncomfortable, right? I honestly think you talk to the most successful organizations, and they've got that same ethos somewhere in their corporate culture. I know they do. I mean, you read books about it, you read about, some of the most successful tech companies, et cetera. They're all, failing forward, so to speak, right? I wanted, for the final subject here, this is one that's been beaten to death, the work from home piece, right? And I know my traditional bank clients, are still a little more tethered to the office. And I definitely side with that in specific situations, but there's others where, it doesn't make much sense and it limits the amount of talent you're able to actually bring on. Now, Choice Bank has, as I mentioned, 22 different states with employees from your bank, there. And you've leaned into the work from home piece. I always want to kind of understand how you manage that talent the best it can be managed. And, how does it obviously help you recruit or even help with existing employees to have a good work from home management strategy?
So honestly, it really stems from organizational design and who we are and what we're trying to do, because similar to almost everybody out there, we were very hesitant prior to COVID. And so COVID in so many ways positioned us to think different. So when we were faced with this situation to determine, especially when it was time to come back in, things were a little bit safer. It was just so fun to see the process that was built and really allow the employee to make the decision with the right guardrails. So really, we've got a simple questionnaire that says, who's your customer and what do they value and what are the needs that you are helping them with? So when they work with their manager, they say, hey, can I do this from home or can't I? And what might be their pain points? What might be their preconceived notions, right? So even if I can serve my customer from home, they might have some perceptions that I might need to, be proactive about. So if I don't answer the phone right away, what does that mean? Does that, I think there's this fear of, if I'm in the office, I could be in the break room or I could be in the hallway. But when we don't answer it from when we're at home, we kind of have to treat it different. And so it's positioning the employees to be able to ask the right questions about who their customers are first and foremost, and if they can serve those needs from home. And then the second is their personal preference. So customer comes first, always. Personal preference comes next. And it's never a one size fits all. And we're allowing the employees to make the decision. Now, that doesn't mean sometimes it doesn't work. And we have to be able to address it and find a solution for why that might not be working. So I think it's a little different. It's never a bring everybody back in. You can see why people argue both sides of that, but we hire really intelligent people that can make really intelligent decisions with the right things to consider in mind. And we really haven't had any concern with it thus far. And like you said, it's allowed us to hire talent all over the nation when really our physical locations are in 2 states. And now we're in 22 and a fifth of our workforce is working from home.
Wow. Yeah. And again, another great response. I definitely feel like, having that kind of like gauge customer first, then employee, like that's perfect thinking. And empowerment is what I'm hearing from you as well. I wanted to ask though, is there somewhere where you draw the line, like maybe a certain level of the company? Our bread and butter is the executive level, C-suite, senior level searches. And a lot of times it's like my CFO needs to be elbow to elbow with me, my COO, my CHRO, whoever it might be. That just, if they're right next to you, things can get done quicker. So do you ever draw the line at areas of your company? Or is it the same criteria across the board?
We have never drawn the line. In fact, we've been very proud because even prior to COVID, we don't have a corporate office. I mean, we have one for all technical standpoint reasons that we need to, but our executive leadership team has been spread across our entire footprint. And if you ask that who's my customer question, that exec team should be very quickly able to say, we need to be out across our footprint. We need some executives to be experiencing at home. We need some executives to be in the office. So if they're understanding who their customer is, whether it's the employee base or not, similar to how I consider human resources, we've got employees in all spectrums. So we better have employees in HR that are experiencing all of those different experiences as well, so we can serve them the best we can. And I think it's just, again, being able to ask that question, each position. Water cooler conversations are great. The collision conversations are fantastic. And so you have to deploy certain things that allows you to still have those. And you just have to be good at picking up the phone when the question pops into your head. And organizations find themselves falling very quickly down a bad communication path and just kind of staying in their own little worlds. But if you have the guardrails and culture, you can make it work in a really nice way.
Yeah. Well, I was also thinking about like generational preferences too. That comes into play. The younger generations desire maybe more work life, whereas the older ones desire better, kind of in-office support, rapport, that type of thing. It sounds like you've confronted that head on as well.
Yeah. And like you said, that's the personal preference that comes second. And so for myself, I like being in the office. I like the separation, but we know that, again, it's a generational thing of that work-life balance separation where now it's just all come together and it's all connected and people want it connected. They don't want it separate. And so you just have to acknowledge that personal preference side after the customer.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to the end of our show. And Sam, I just wanted to thank you very, very much for joining today. You're extremely talented. Wanted to make sure I got your perspective on some of these things. And Choice is a really, really unique organization. You guys should be extremely proud of what you guys have accomplished.
Thank you, Brian. It's been a pleasure and always enjoy speaking with you. And I know Brian does as well, and all of our leadership team. So appreciate you in that circle of wonderful talent and just new thought leadership.
My pleasure. Well, thanks again, Sam.
Thank you.